Greetings, Darklings, from across the interweb. It's once again I, the Duchess, Precious Ken, here for the Sounds and Shadows podcast. And man, I had to scrape myself up off the floor to get ready to do this one. We did Kat's tribute show on Friday, which was both emotional and physical, but really, really great. And so many people from the Detroit scene came out to support somebody just so near and dear to us. And kind of like I said, then we just all need to do a little extra to pick up the torch, to kind of carry what she meant to the Detroit scene and what she did. So um, but then I hugged like 200 people in the winter, which is always dicey, and I came home with some nasty crud, which left me laid up. But on the fourth day, I awoke and I felt pretty myself again. So I'm feeling pretty good, and I'm glad because this is an interview of somebody who's been part of the Sounds and Shadows group for a long time, and I've talked to quite a bit, and we've discussed doing interviews. So today it's finally going to happen. Before I get to that, like always, I like to, if you send me over something, give a shout out about it. And everybody here knows I am a huge fan of Fires, the band Fires, and they hadn't really released anything in a hot minute, and she finally did, and has some really exciting news that I'm not sure I'm allowed to really get into and talk about, but just release been coming out. And so Fires, The Tunnel at the End of the Light, was released, and I highly recommend for everybody to go check that out, as well as a one-off single that she put out called Some Levity About the Whole Gothsicle Situation, which was amusing as well. If people know kind of the behind-the-scenes goth politics of it all, it was a pretty interesting zinger joke, but also a cool song that she put out. So if you don't know about Fires, really, truly, this is, I don't know, some of my favorite mixture of genres really blended together in electronic music, and somebody who just, I don't know, always brings the spit and vinegar and makes something interesting. So please go check that out when you get a chance on Bandcamp. So without further ado, my next guest up is Mr. Scott Harris out of New York, upstate New York, by Woodstock, I think, if I remember properly, of the band Hororhaus, and then also with a new project that's more recent called Ancient My Enemy. So a couple different things. Also does DJing for events, and I think does boutique indie record label too, right, Scott?
Right, correct.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. Good to have you on board.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Ken. Good to see you face to face.
Yeah. What's left of me after feeling like I ran a marathon for 4 days there? It left me pretty wiped out, but I'm bouncing back. So.
That's good. That's good.
Why don't we start out? A question I always like to ask to get started on is, there was a thing that happened. It was a show you saw for the first time that, your older sibling took you to, or, you heard an album for the first time, or a song on the radio, or you saw The Crow and stole your mom's eyeliner, or whatever it was.
Right.
Something happened that kind of, you heard it, you saw it, and you thought, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. And you went all in on it. Tell me a little bit about what that journey was like into kind of the dark music scene.
Yeah. So I was born quite a while ago. So I went through listening to in the late 70s AM Gold stuff. I was born in the area of New York City. So I got a lot of what was going on from the city, like 70s disco and things like that. So like dance music was kind of in my wheelhouse, along with listening to things that were like classic rock. So AM Gold stuff, if you're from the New York City area and you remember WABC, they'd be playing things like anything from like the Eagles and Kiss to like Donna Summer and Village People and things like that. So like it was kind of widespread. And then New York City getting like the whole thing that was starting with hip hop very early 80s.
Sure.
I was getting that, and then MTV hit. And then so when MTV hit, I had it in 1981. The town that I grew up in actually had MTV, and I had cable. So from around August, September of 81, I started watching MTV a lot, and I was pretty much a sponge on the whole thing. It didn't really matter who it was. I mean, like I was just as much of a fan of Iron Maiden as I was Duran Duran. So I liked everything coming across the board, like dark music, heavier things too. And I think that like when I first started listening to anything that was like really like I would say post-punk, I mean, I kind of came out of new wave, listening to Duran Duran and Depeche Mode and things like that, like a lot of people did in the early 80s. Listening to also like radio, like that was college radio, played a lot of like stuff that was like there was WLIR that was in Long Island that played all the new wave stuff that was happening, a little bit more edgy than the college radio stuff would play, like hardcore punk and things like that. So kind of like pulled into that whole wheelhouse with everything. But I had a friend that was in 10th. When I was in 10th grade, he was in 11th grade. He had an older brother that had a really an amazing record collection. And we would sit in his house and go through all the stuff that he'd have. And, you know, he'd have anything from like angelic upstarts to like Susie and Bauhaus and Crass, really strange, Nina Hagen, weirder.
And there's,
that stuff.
you know, I've talked with other guests about this. There's something so special too, especially back then, and it always makes me feel nostalgic thinking about sharing records with a friend, like
Sure.
the ritual, like
Right.
taking the liner notes out,
Right.
putting the disc on, you know, reading through the lyric sheet, all that. There's something special about that in terms of forging bonds, both with the music, but also with your friends and with people, because it was like sharing something, I don't know, secret or sacred with a
Yeah,
rock.
I think what it was is that the artwork was so great and big that you were able to kind of go through it, and you felt like you really had something in your hand, and you felt like it was almost like with, you know, once CDs came out, it's hard to explain to somebody that didn't experience vinyl when it first came out. Like that was the format, you know, and then it turned into CDs and changed into digital. But with records, with vinyl, I mean, I'm still a big vinyl collector. I mean, you would open, yeah, of course, you'd open up the gatefold, it would be big, and you would get into the artwork. It wouldn't feel like it's small. It wouldn't feel like there was like intangible. You felt like you had something in your hand. And I think that kind of transcended to MTV and things that were a visual. So like when MTV came around, you know, yeah, you had still vinyl and you have cassettes and stuff like that or whatever, but like, you know, the videos really kind of connected you with the artists. And I think that the artwork that was in, you know, vinyl connected you to the artist. So like you got into the lyrics, you felt like you were getting some sort of like personal experience with the vinyl because it's physical copy or whatever. Yeah. So we would go through all that stuff, and I started seeing some of that stuff on MTV. They started playing like Susie, Spellbound.
Yeah,
but like
120 minutes, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, before then, though, like talking like 83, you know, like 84, around that time. Then I went to go see The Hunger. And when I saw The Hunger, friends of mine, I saw it in the theater in New Jersey where I was growing up. And my friends were into like Bauhaus, and they were also into things like Susie, but also like the Cramps and things like that. We listened to that in the car driving around school, being angry teenagers.
Sure.
And we would, you know, when I went to go see The Hunger, like I already knew The Sky's Gone Out. We had the cassette. We listened to it all the time. I didn't know Bela Lugosi's dead. I didn't make the connection of what they looked like yet. They were not on MTV at all. And so when I went to go see The Hunger, and I saw that whole opening scene with Bauhaus and Peter Murphy, and I'm a huge Bowie fan too, since the late 70s, early 80s. It all made sense to me. It kind of clicked. So I think that's kind of like what really kind of pulled me into the dark scene. Like, you know, like, again, I still liked other things that were like metal and things that like that too.
Sure.
It kind of brought me into that whole thing.
I think that's a great example. And I think that one was true for a lot of people. Kind of like when I made the joke about, you know, The Crow or something like that, you know, not that for older people than that, The Hunger was the exact same thing. It was a
Sure.
big awakening for a lot of people, and just, I mean, Murphy looks so freaking cool, and David Bowie and
Yep.
Susan Sarandon. It just, I mean, this, you want to talk about falling in love with the macabre and
Right.
the, kind of just darker beauty of
Yeah,
art.
for
That
sure.
movie was it. I mean, you visually, it is just one of the most like dark, romantic, stunning things you can imagine. And it still is today. It's one of those that's a classic. It holds up that well.
No, absolutely. And first seeing it in the theater like that was really pretty mind blowing. Like you would see anything in the theater that, you know, depending on your age and where you are and what you grew up with. I
Sure.
mean, obviously things are like more impactful to you. That was impactful to me because I actually saw it in the theater. I probably was 15 or 16 or
Yeah.
something, you know. But I also think that like music and stuff like that I grew up on, like that in my earlier, like when, formative years, as like a preteen and like before then too, growing up in the New York City area, there's no cable yet. There's just like, 2, 4, 7, 5, whatever, nine,
Sure.
30, you had like 5, 7, whatever, 13 channels, and, they play like old horror and stuff like that on those channels. And like, I was one of those kids from the 70s that was a monster kid. Like I was totally into the whole, Universal, Nosferatu, all that stuff or whatever that was
Yeah. The
happening.
Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, that type stuff.
Black and white stuff and
Yeah.
things that were creepy looking. And of course they played all the stuff that was in the 70s that were happening at the time that was like, you know, on the cheesier side or maybe like made for TV things or whatever that were happening. It was an interesting time to be watching TV in the 70s because really you didn't have any other escape to go to. It was just like, oh, what's on today? Oh, Dark Shadows is on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You would see that, but then you'd also see New York City horror stuff in real time, you know, TV itself, like news channels and stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like New York City news. You're talking about late 70s 44 caliber killer, David Berkowitz. I mean, these are like real time things happening too. You have crisis that's going on in the United States with the oil and everything. But then again, I mean, a lot of the stuff, that was made for kids at that time, like Land of the Lost, Sid and Marty Krofft, is all really weird and trippy. It's like off the
Right.
late 60s satanic panic weirdness or whatever that's happening. So you think about like culture or whatever. So like that was kind of, if you were watching TV, like you were kind of getting that too. So like a lot of kids were, there's Scooby-Doo, there's all this stuff or whatever that's ghostly, that's
Yeah.
kind of like on TV at the time. So kind of like all that kind of stuff kind of influenced me to kind of move into the
And
direction
even
that.
the Scooby Doo and stuff, I mean, which, was a very silly, very goofy kid show, but it still featured a lot of like those classic golden age monsters and stuff were part of the bit of Scooby Doo. It had like Dracula and, werewolf and, all that stuff all the time on there.
Exactly. And then you have like things that are like Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. And
Right.
there's those are like made for kids or whatever, and a lot of kids, that they had experienced it in back in the day in the 30s and the 40s, and they went to like, movie houses and stuff. I mean, like that was like kind of like interweaved into our culture. So now today, I mean, like you go back to talking about vinyl and like, there's like your friend would have to turn you on to it. I mean, you'd have to pass notes to people. You'd be talking things that would be not the same as like obviously the internet days or whatever. Everything's instantaneous. The minute that you want to talk to somebody, you can message them. Your music is instantaneous. You can go to Bandcamp. You can go anywhere you want and find stuff. You can also, I'm sorry, I have a.
That's okay.
Yeah. There's all this different stuff or whatever that's like you can find right now, like instantaneously. Like you want to go and you want to like say research a band and you like a band, you can go to Spotify and you can go, find their playlist, and then it's going to give you other bands that are going to be like them, or the algorithm thinks you'd like them or whatever, but it sends you down a rabbit hole and you can like learn a lot. So I think
you can even find a lot of information personally about the band. You can look up their webpage, their Facebook page, and kind of like get that connection. Whereas learning about a band back then was a lot more complicated. And I love the idea of you saying that too, because now, I mean, I guess with say like a Twitch stream or something, especially after the pandemic, we have ways that we can, I don't know, like do a record listening party online and you
Sure.
set one up or something and people log in and we talk about it while we listen to it. But
Right.
back then, that was a Friday night.
Sure.
Like we bought went down to the record store, saved our money, got a copy of Radiohead Benz or something, brought it back,
Right.
and then four of us would sit down and like that was our night. We would just hang out there and we would listen to that record and talk about it, like both sides twice or something.
Right.
And I feel like that's something that I don't know is really lost and I miss in terms of a connection to people over music.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing about like albums, like where albums were like start to finish, and you were like listening to something start to finish. Now it's kind of like almost like going in the whole music industry itself, like major labels too. Like it's all like fast, kind of rewinding back to like the '50s where it was like singles, and it's like it's not really like LP based like as it used to be. Like there are LP based genres that are out there. I mean, like things that are like, like I like to listen to a variety of things, but like I really like black metal, I like death metal, I like the metal underground genres, and a lot of that stuff is very album based, and it's not like, oh well, I'm going to do a single or whatever, but like a lot of things are like that. And you're talking about like DJs trying to get your music played, like they are looking like what's the single or what's the song that's going to work for the dance floor or whatever it's going to be. So it's a whole kind of, it's interesting, like different genres are of different ways, so the dark scene now, a lot of it is like that, is like kind of like where's it's the single, and there's so much oversaturation that's out there because of the internet too, that it's really hard to be able to pinpoint one thing or another. And then like something's here and it's gone, something here and it's gone. Back in the day, you'd have to like get signed, and even the indie labels, I mean, like they had their roster of, and it is like that too now. There is definitely like some really great labels that are in the dark scene that are putting out good product, and they have a roster of bands or whatever that they use, and they're promoting and stuff. But a lot of it's all DIY now. So, which is interesting because I mean, I guess it's because of the computer boom and that everyone has a computer.
Right. It's the technology's there now that it used to be. Yeah, you had to drop hundreds of dollars an hour,
right?
For studio time. Hope you got the right take in like the hour that you had that you could afford. But now, no, for $1,500, you can basically have a pro 1990s or 1980s studio in your bedroom.
Absolutely,
where the sound quality is the same, if not better. So
totally. It is interesting. I mean, like like the whole being able to do your own thing now with being able to have computers. I mean, it took me a long time to be able to figure out like, or maybe get enough, chutzpah up to say, hey, I'm going to actually do some electronic music like on the computer, and I'm going to figure it out on my own. Sometimes it's like, when you're in a band and you're like, because, I played in bands. I am originally a drummer. That's really kind of like my main instrument. So, I've been playing drums since, in bands since the late 80s and in New York City, a lot of people in the New York scene and stuff, and did a lot of studio stuff. And so you learn, like how to record things and everything. But everything now is just so like electronic and not so much like I would say easier, but it's just like, it's about learning how to be able to use what works for you. Like, like what program works for you. Like it doesn't have to be a specific DAW. It doesn't have to be a specific this or that. It's just like kind of like whatever works for you and however you can make it work for yourself,
Well, and there's a million choices, and kind of like we were talking about in just our home studio. Basically anything you can imagine, a 1978 Leslie rotating reverb amplifier, which if I wanted to play on one of those, you're talking, 3-4 grand or something but now I can just dial it up and boom, if that's the sound that's in my head, it's there exactly, and so I think there's ups and downs to that and good and bad, but no, I think it's definitely interesting and has changed things in how we approach music. In some of the ways, I think it's made it a lot harder and made it, DIY to break through to that next level. And I want to talk to you about that because that's something we've talked about
Yeah.
online before. But in a lot of ways, you can have chances to create your vision in ways that you never could have without a label putting a hand on your shoulder and telling you what your art was and what it
Sure.
needed to be, So
Totally.
I don't know, like I mean, some things are always better, some things are worse, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to ask you about that it was funny right when you said we started the interview, you were like kind of like, oh, Ken, well, there you are in person and you see it in video. But for me, I guess I didn't think about it. I knew you were from New York, but
Right.
hearing the New York in your voice when it first started happening, catching little things that you're saying, I was like, oh man, no, he's real New York, like legit. Tell me a little bit about because things like that, like LA, New York, Chicago,
Yeah.
Detroit, where I've
Right.
some of those places have music instilled into the sound of everything that happens in it.
Right.
And I think it leaves a thumbprint on people. When you hear their music, there's something about sometimes a New York band, it to me leaves a particular, I don't know, stain of that city on them where they sound kind of New York.
Right.
You feel like that's something that has affected you, and do you think the city is kind of a part of your albums and the art that you make because it could not be. It's just that much a part of who you are.
No, definitely. Um, Trying to think about that. Yeah. Definitely. I think that what I'm doing with Horrorhaus anyway is kind of like going back to like my childhood and re kind of revisiting that, and it definitely has to do with being in the New York City area. I mean, like my mom's from New York City. I did not grow up in New York City, but I grew up right next to New York City. So like my whole mom's side of the family is from New York City. So
Sure.
I definitely have that sort of and I started going to the city as a teen, hung out in all the clubs, like started 85, so like I hit danceteria in a lot of places and been in that scene and stuff. And there was really not a goth scene in a way then, so it was kind of like pyramids, some dance clubs, there wasn't like a specific real goth night. It was more like punk rock. Some people fell into that dark look and liked that stuff, and certain bars would play that kind of thing. But I feel like that the urban side of it, for what I do, there's no denying that there's a funk element, and that's definitely a New York City thing. Things that, some of the backbeats that I do, I think probably come from there and kind of are a little bit hard hitting like that, little abrasive, not necessarily abrasive. I mean, the idea with Horrorhaus was more about like going back, sound wise, was kind of like revisiting like the 70s and the soundtracks and stuff that I was into, horror music and
Like
ambient thing.
goblins, stuff like that.
Yeah, Goblin and stuff like that, but John Carpenter,
Sure.
like Halloween stuff. Jerry Goldsmith, I like a lot, who did The Omen.
Yeah.
Late 70s, early 80s, synth music, kind of like, I think I needed to take like I wanted to do this a long time ago, but like, and I had like a death rock project that I did in the late 80s that I did on my own. And some of that stuff I kind of morphed into with Horrorhaus and kind of adopted a death rock sort of thing, a dark wave sort of thing about it. But I wanted to be able to mix the pot, and I wanted to be able to like take things that are from other types of music that I've listened to. So like, I'm just going to fast forward. So like in the 90s, I really didn't hang out in the goth scene. Like I played the goth scene because I was in this band called Visaria, and Visaria was on Century Media, and we played with Das Ish, who was a German dark wave band, and we toured with them late late 90s and stuff. But I was hanging out like in the rave scene. Like I was hanging out, I like really was like into Orbital and Chemical Brothers and drum and bass and trance and stuff like that, like Paul Van Dyke early on, you know, when he first started playing like Twilo in the City. And like I was going to those clubs because like, I don't know, like I liked I played the goth scene, but like I did the goth scene, and it was like not anything against the goth scene. It was just like I was listening to, on a dance level, dance music level, things that were more dance club oriented. And I felt like that a lot of the stuff that was coming out of the 90s that was like in that genre, industrial, like I loved industrial too. Godflesh I loved, Ministry I loved, but like I kind of was going down that rabbit hole with things. So that's kind of like where I hung out. So like when I started hearing things like John Digweed and like dark progressive dance music, it was something that was like, you know, that aha moment in dance music that I like was looking for in dark dance music that I didn't hear in the 90s in industrial. To me, like industrial was another thing, and it's great, but like I liked more sparse, deeper, soundtracky kind of things. And that's kind of like where that scene was going. So I think that like I couldn't have done Hororhaus until I heard that music. It like kind of grabbed me into, oh, this is something else that I'd like to adopt in. And then when I started listening to a lot of black metal, a lot of death metal in around 2003, and experimental things like Sono and Drone and things, Velvet Cocoon, really weird, dark stuff that I was kind of like very bored of listening to things that were like, and it's just me being bored, like by like listening to contemporary verse, chorus things.
Yeah, man.
I wanted to listen to something that was like outside that box. So I started going down that rabbit hole for years. I was listening to strictly that stuff. Somewhere around 2015, I heard Boy Harsher and Linnea Spara and things like that. And so I was in the New York City scene in a band called Angel 13 in the early 2000s with like Interpol and those bands like that. And that was cool, but like I felt like, and it's no offense against those bands at all, I just felt like that they didn't get the 80s right, correctly.
Yeah. Fair.
Just to me.
I think more than that, you know, because I was in college when kind of like Interpol and that stuff was coming out. I think I was like a freshman in college, and it hit me hard. I was very into that, but I think what did it for me is, I don't know, it felt like Joy Division again. And so it was a chance for me, basically, who never would have got a chance to see Joy Division in 1978, to see them. You know, I mean, that's basically what it was.
Totally.
But to your point, hearing that stuff, I never felt like, although I was very into it and enjoyed it, that this was reinventing the wheel or like opening my mind. Basically, I mean, it felt like a retread of something that I already liked.
Yeah, totally. And like, again, like there's no offense against those bands. Like,
they were awesome, but
there's the Strokes and the Killers and all that stuff that came out, like, you know, and that's
Libertines. That was one of my favorites from New York around there doing it. Yeah,
all that stuff. You know, I was around that time, saw it all come, but like, it didn't grab me that way. Like when I first heard, like I was saying, like on a dance level, like Boy Harsher, Linnea, I felt like they got the dark wave thing. Like, okay, this is kind of like Yaz, but it also has like this other Euro dance thing happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Boy Harsher is so big. Like, I think that because like the Euro crowd, like it's weird because like, I don't really know whether or not, and I could be wrong, but like some of those like very, very big DJs that are Visa DJs and stuff like that, I don't know how on that scene they are. They're on some other thing. And but the thing that's great about what those bands do, I feel, is that like they kind of recreate what was happening in the very early 80s, but they're pushing it forward to this other thing. And the writing is really good. And the implementation of what they're doing is really good. And so it grabbed me. It was like, I was like, okay, you know, so I went to go see them. I went to go see Drab Majesty before the pandemic. And I was like, I think I want to try to do this Hororhaus thing. I'm like, I see bands doing this, 2 people, 1 people, it's like the whole rule book has been really thrown out the door. It's like, there's no, like, it's got to be this or it's got to be that. I mean, if it's more like this or it's more like that in a style, it may fit in more with something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, like, there's no room for you as an artist to be out there. Right. Just do what you want. So, like, that's kind of like what made me, I'm like, I'm going to try this. And, like, right before the pandemic, 2019, I started embryonic, like, laying it out on computer, putting it together, figuring out how to use the DAW. It was all experimentation, trying to figure it out. Like, I don't have any engineering experience. Sure. It's like, I'm just like, okay, what sounds do I think would work? And, like, I have, like, an old, Roland MC box thing that I use. Right. And, it's like got old sounds in it. And then, kind of, some stuff that's plugins that are, like, off my phone even, like started coming through that was, there was a Minimoog plugin thing for your phone. And, like, I was, like, playing with bass lines and, like, those Korg early 80s bass lines. I love all that stuff. Electro funk, like Madonna's first record, things like that. Like, I love those bass lines. I always wanted to kind of, like, what if I did that in a minor setting? Like, instead of doing something like in a major setting, like a lot of that stuff that's very pop, but, like, take it into black metal and, like, do things that are, like, half stepping and stuff. So that's kind of like what I wanted to start doing with that, and kind of just,
I think another interesting, I think an interesting thing on that as well is, we talked earlier about kind of you have your own studio, which wasn't possible before, like in your bedroom. But the other thing, my friend Stephen Archer always brings this up to me, is that we have access to, like you were saying, the instruction manual for anything you could possibly imagine. And if you want to put in the time to actually learn something and read it, you would have had to go to freaking recording school. They guarded those secrets carefully of how all this stuff worked. And now, like you said, you know what? I'm feeling electronic music right now. Let me just read up on this real quick and become an expert in it, and just decided to do it,
Yep. It's trial and error. And it's also watching YouTube videos, like how to do this and how to do that. Like, when I started doing Twitch DJing, like, I had no idea how to do that. And I came into it a little bit late. And DJ Sinus, who's one of the very well-known goth DJs, and started playing my stuff early on, helped me. He's like, here's a bunch of videos, go read, and figure it out or whatever, So, like, there's definitely, like, it's very easy to be, I mean, there's so many things that you can learn on YouTube, right? I mean, like, I learned how to, like, replace the lamps in my old amp from 1973, like, all the head, all the lights in it, there's all those things like anything electronic, like how to like, if you have like an issue with your DAW and you're like, you don't know how to edit something, you just go on, like
cars, how to make a lamb shank, anything.
Anything, it's all there. It's not like you're like, oh, I never learned how to do it, nobody showed me. I mean, it's like, it's all, you just figure it out and stuff. And I mean, I've always been an ear person, so a lot of the stuff that I do with Hororhaus, and even with stuff when I was recording the Ancient My Enemy stuff, has all been by ear. It's like, does it sound good? Is it going directly into the board? I'm not processing a lot of stuff, like, it's not like, some people are like overly, like, for instance, like one of the EPs that I did, I had a very good person that I know that's awesome. He's in the death metal scene, but he's also he does electronic music. He's really, really talented. His name's Slasher Dave, and he's a part of Acid Witch, but he does his own electronic music. If you don't know who he is, you should look him up. He's pretty much like the new John Carpenter genius, starting to do stuff with like soundtracking or whatever, and he's all got like, make this wider and this and that and stuff. Or like, talking about like sound wars and stuff. And I was always like trying to want to get my stuff louder and trying to get it this way and that way. And he's always like, does it sound good? It's like don't worry so much about like it being as loud as everyone else's, music or whatever, like,
Right.
sound levels and stuff like that. Sometimes you just have to like think about like what's the sound quality and whether or not that works. So, do it yourself, sometimes has shortcomings, but then you have control of what you do. So
Right.
there's the kind of push and pull thing, like with the HMI Enemy, we're talking about trying to get, in the next bunch of music that we're going to be doing is get somebody else to mix it, or get somebody else to master it as well. Like a lot of bands that I like that are like in the dark wave scene do that. Maybe they'll have somebody record their vocals like in a pro studio, but everything else they're going to do pre-production wise. It's almost like what Chemical Brothers would do back in the 90s. Like they record everything themselves, then they go into a studio and then they mix it. And they have somebody else like kind of making heads or tails of where the stems are and trying to get it like maybe to like a better quality and a better level, So
why don't let's spin off towards that right now and tell me a little bit. And you started the new project and you brought in other people to work with on it for the Ancient Miami.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about, because it feels like that's kind of the focus or future for you right now. You had the self-titled EP that you put out for it. What are you doing with it? What's the future for it? And what can we look for next?
Yeah. So basically Ancient Miami was like born from this party that we have in Woodstock called Floor Show. About 2 years ago, I started doing events up here in Catskill, New York, at this place called Avalon. And we pulled in a lot of the dark bands that are in the area to do these shows with us for about a year. And bands like Pilgrims of Yearning played.
Yeah.
Ex Hyena played. Yep. Ex Hyena played. Ghost Cop played.
Nice. Very cool.
Centrifuge played. A lot of,
all Sounds and Shadows bands.
It was, bands that like, there was Procession Magazine, which was, now there's Nocturnazine.
Yeah.
As you know, Procession was like, kind of like the new kind of dark wave mag, print mag. And like a lot of the bands that were playing in there, I mean, I was reading up on it. They featured me too, and kind of, figuring out what to do with that. And I wanted to bring live music up here that, there are some dark parties that are happening in the area, but like they're not doing like live bands. They're not doing anything. They're not bringing it in. And, it's either you're on that scene or you're not, and a lot of people are not, it's interesting. So we decided, like there was another DJ with me that I met through a friend. His name's Tommy Grenis, and he was in like Pressure Head. He was in Nick Turner's Hawkwind. He moved up here with his wife to Willow from LA. And so he's involved with Cleopatra Records, a lot of different things or whatever in the 90s. So long story short, we got together and started DJing together. And we decided that like after doing a year of that, maybe we should do something even more local in Woodstock, which is like right in our backyard. I mean, sure. Catskill's like about a half hour from us. We're like, let's do that. So we started doing that party. And when we started doing this new party called Floor Show, at that time, there's a person that's co-hosting with us named TT, and she's a vocalist too. And me and Tommy were kind of like, why don't we try to do something with TT and like do a music project? So we just started getting together and throwing ideas off each other. And then, 8 months later or whatever, we have this EP. So it was like an experiment to see whether or not we could work together. I think we surprised ourselves in what we came up with. And we I knew like, cause I was like, more like kind of like I was like recording everything. I was doing the engineering. I was doing a lot of the formatting too, and kind of like getting the songs to where they needed to kind of be in the editing and stuff. And I kind of knew like when we started working with TT that it was going to be really interesting and cool. And we just, it just ended up being what it is. It like ended up being something that I think that it was bigger than what we thought it would be, in a way of like, we proved to ourselves that we could actually do this project together, I think we had our doubts in the beginning, just because we didn't know if it would work,
Yeah.
because we're bringing in different elements. Like I'm not doing everything with Hororhaus. It's like I do everything. I'm not doing everything. I have Tommy who's playing guitar and he's also playing bass. And so he's coming up with that element, and I'm doing the keys and I'm doing the drum programming and doing that element. And then
And Horrorhaus though is much more, because we've reviewed you. You guys have had single of the month before on Sounds and Shadows. But it is a very textural, like you said, cinematic sound.
right.
For it's kind of has that expansive, I don't know, putting you in a place in your head.
Yeah. Right.
How is the sound different for this, setting out with three people? Because it is. I mean, it's not the same kind of just textural thing. This has much more of a, I don't know, standardish, beat to it, melody to it, like toe tap to it.
Yeah. I mean, basically, out of the music that we spin at Floor Show, which is kind of like across the board, we play, dark wave industrial, it's a not a goth party, but it's a dark party. So we play all that kind of music. It's kind of like just pulling in everything that we like. So like there's different elements to what we bring in. Like we had a conversation about like what would we like to do with this, and as sound wise, even before, like me and Tommy kind of like sprung off of each other, like what could we actually do with this and where should we go with it? And I kind of pulled him into the dark scene that he hadn't been in a while. Like he's really from the space rock scene, and he's from, LA punk rock and stuff. So like, he played with Nick Turner's Hawkwind. So like he's a space rock kind of guy, but he did go to, the Batcave in London, and he was a part of that scene. He's a little bit older than I am, but he was a part of that scene. So he kind of, the minute that I was like, kind of like we started doing this DJing thing, I kind of introduced him in a way to a lot of the new stuff, because like he wasn't really on it. And I was like, hey, here's all these things. And I'd be playing all these things, when we'd be DJing, and he'd be like, wow, that's great. That's great. That's great. That's great. So like, kind of like from there, we're like, okay, like, why don't we try to do something? So like he brought in like, we would sit across, and we've done, sit across it from a table. He's got his guitar and he's got his bass effects and stuff. He's got that. And then I've got, like a drum programmer, or I'm putting some drum programming in. And I think that like, I was like, okay, beat wise, what should we do?
Sure.
We need a 909 in there. We need to make it electronic. Let's not do this live drums and like that. Like, let's have an electronic kick. That's going to be like a pulse. It's going to it's going to pull it into dark wave, and it's going to pull it into the electronic thing by having that low end. So like, that's important. Then we're like, okay, like beat wise, what could we do there? I'm a huge Bow Wow Wow fan. I love tribal stuff, primal stuff. Like, why don't we try to do that? Like, that's maybe stereotypical of death rock and things like that are, Susie, things are Tommy, kind of around there. And then, but like, could we do that, but still have like a 909 going? Yeah. Still have a low end going, instead of like being like, okay, we're going to be a death rock band. Or something like that. Let's get rid of that.
Yeah.
No, we were going to say, let's do that. So like, that's the foundation for rhythm wise. Then, you have Tommy coming in, and he's like into Killing Joke, and he's into like a lot of different other types of guitar players. And so he'll bring that element in the Cocteau Twins and things. So like, he's got that kind of a thing, chimey sort of guitar thing. Bass wise, he wants to do things that are more fuzzy. But then I'm also into like electronic funk bass lines. So like, I'm like, okay, can we actually do that too, on top of everything else that we're doing? So like, sound wise, we did that. And I'm like, okay, what else can we actually add on top of that? And so like, Tommy comes up with these very, very melodic, hooky kind of guitar things. And I'm like very into like the breathy synth. And I'm like, I'll do that and counter what you're doing. So it's like kind of like he's doing something, I'm doing something in there. I'm layering in, he's layering in. There's definitely like things that are outro that all of a sudden things kind of start going a little bit more psychedelic and stuff. So like,
Yeah.
I think that with Ancient My Enemy, I think a lot of the three of us like are very comfortable saying we're a dark psych band, really more than
Yeah.
anything at
And
all.
the fact that it sounds like it just was very much an even collaboration, whereas, Horrorhaus was,
Right.
just your mind alone in a room screaming out its thoughts, whereas this sounds like it was a great synthesis.
Yeah, totally. And again, like when we brought in TT to do vocals, we weren't really sure it was going to happen because she's really from a punk rock background, and it's like we're now in this sort of thing where it's like we're thinking about hooks and we're thinking about like you know rhythm and things that are swirly, that are hooky, and
Yeah.
what can work. And I think that lyrically, you know, she's deep on her lyrics, and her lyrics are not just the usual, like, this could go, like anything can go any direction,
Sure.
vocally, lyrically, however you want to go. Horror House is all horror lyrics and conceptual things, conceptual story from start to finish. Everything that I do is kind of like the mini Dark Side of the Moon or something. It's like it starts here, it ends here, and then it goes back, and it's like it's the storyline, and it kind of has a circular thing.
Sure.
With this, it's like not as much concept oriented, I don't think, lyrically, but lyrically it is very deep, and it is of what we're going through in our time period, which is very, very interesting. And we are in strange, dark times. So lyrics are kind of, I think, lending to that. And I think that the lyrics are very introspective too. So it's a good combination together. And I think that so for the future, we're going to do more music. We're talking about doing more.
Are you guys going to take it out, play out with it?
Yeah. Yeah, we did. The first show that we did was in November. It was the end of November, November 23rd. We played at Tubby's, which is a club in Kingston. We basically sold it out, but we had Noir was also playing with us, and Frenchie and the Punk were in the middle.
I'm sorry, who'd you say was playing with you?
Noir.
Oh, you were playing with Athan?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. That's great for your first show. I mean, Athan's a freaking legend.
Yeah, I know. I've talked to him a bunch of times, but when I saw him at the show, I was like, I know you from Fahrenheit 451, that's going back a ways, that was like high school for me. Like, all the girls loved him or whatever. There's like the dark poet or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm friends with Rebecca from Neurofarm, and she reached out to me about doing a show. She was like, yeah, have Horrorhaus, play with us or whatever, like put the show together if you can. They had a date that was open in their schedule, and I scheduled that, and then sadly they had to pull out because, Brian's been having some health problems and stuff. So they had to pull out, but I had Frenchie in the middle. They came, Frenchie and the Punk played in the middle. They're local, friendly with them, really good friends.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, they're great, and I love those two guys, Samantha and Scott. They basically were the ones that were kind of responsible for setting the show up in the first place. They kind of told Rebecca, contact Scott, see if you can get something. So we did that show, and that was our first show. We just did 4 songs and with an intro. It was 25 minutes long or whatever, and went off really well. So yeah, we're going to do some more stuff. We're looking to do stuff locally. And then hopefully we'll branch out and maybe do some stuff in New York City, maybe Boston, and see what happens, But we need to get more music together. So we're going to be working on that now. So, plan is probably to do another 4 or 5 songs and get those together. If we can get 2 more together, we'll start doing a 6-song set, and then we'll keep going and see how it goes.
Nice. Well, that's exciting for the future. Before we get on to the end here, there was one thing I kind of want to talk to you about, because it's something you and I have talked about before and has come up in the Sounds and Shadows group quite a bit, and that's just that the sense of frustration that it's easy to feel these days, because you can have great music, but there's just so many bands out there, and somebody who both plays in a band and is a music reviewer, just the tidal wave of it sometimes can feel overwhelming. And it's so simple to just, I don't know, I get it, feel lost in the wave of it. And
Absolutely.
I kind of wanted to ask you, because I know it's something that you've battled with and tried to find a way through.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you're doing to A, just try and keep your head right, in the face of that,
Yeah.
but then B, find ways to push yourself forward and get yourself out in the world when I don't know how it's done seems to be changing every 5 minutes with what platforms people are using and people are
Yeah.
going to TikTok to do this or
Right.
whatever. How do you try and keep up as a band where it seems like every time you're learning the rules change?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I work at a major label. That's like my day gig.
Yeah.
So like I've done it for over 20 years, and I've seen things ebb and flow. I've seen all things different morph, from 1999 I started, and like all the big acts are, you know, pop acts are still happening, rock bands are still being signed, all
Sure.
that stuff. Then the MP3s come in and almost killed the industry completely. Like people got out of the industry, they're like, it's done. It's never going to ever
Sure.
recover. Then streaming came, and all of a sudden the business model changed, and the money came back, and people, they're everyone, the labels are thriving. They are.
Yeah.
So regardless of the Spotify issues and all that other stuff or
Sure.
whatever, like I think that the biggest thing that you have to kind of keep in perspective is that you create art because you love to create it. That's really the most important thing. Like and it's hard because like if you're self-promoting, I'm a drummer, right? I'm one of those guys from in the back.
Sure.
And I'm also like a New York City guy, like the attitude. And like I know I come off sometimes abrasive. I'm one of those people that are screaming from the back. Lars Ulrich from Metallica, hey yo, I'm here. And
Sure.
sometimes that can rub people the wrong way, but sometimes you have to force things forward sometimes
Yeah.
just to be able to get your name out there, just so you can break through those things. So I
I'm a
think
sports guy too. When you say that, it always makes me think of Dennis Rodman. One of the most, probably the greatest rebounder ever to play basketball, quite possibly, but he didn't really make serious money till he went to Chicago and started, I don't know, being a goof. You know what I mean? And like, but you want to kind of say, what was he doing with some of that stuff? But at the same time, had he not, would anybody have ever noticed him and would he have gotten paid like he did?
right. That's the thing is that there's so much oversaturation now that like it's hard. Like you can hook up with the promoter, you can, get with the label, you can do all that other stuff too. It's like that's all great and everything. Like I mean, like like you could try to say like, oh, I'm going to go the major label way, or you could say I want to get signed, but like an old school way or whatever. But it depends. Like it's like what you're trying to sell, and it's like if you're selling music that's going to be and you have to also think too. It's like depending on the genre that you're in, like the genre that this is very forgiving of age,
Sure.
of gender, of
Yeah.
everything. Like we're like it's like very liberal and very open.
Yeah.
A lot of the scene is, so that's a good thing. But if you're trying to think that you're going to become a rock star or something else like that, that's the thing is that like if you're trying to do that, maybe you're in the wrong scene. Like that's not it's not
We're
you're
not
not.
that big.
But if you want to be Dua Lipa, you're not doing it here. So like you can adopt things from that scene into this scene and move it
Sure.
forward and move out of it or whatever it may be. But I think that like the biggest thing you have to just keep in perspective is that like you have to really love what you do and just throw it out there and do the best that you can. Look, I mean, I've done Horrorhaus now for 5 years. Like I've never played a live show. I don't know if I'll ever play a live show. It's only because I'm like, how do I do this? Like there's a lot of things that are out there, a lot of acts that are out there, one person thing, and they just do it. I've seen it live, they go there, they have the keyboard, they have do some vocals and all that other stuff, right? I don't know if that's for me. Like maybe I will eventually get there or whatever, but like that's part of it too. Like you have to be out there and and then we're talking about platforms. I think you have to stick to a platform. And I think that like the thing about unfortunately with Meta is that like it's got a huge draw, even though the algorithm is weird and all that, it works a certain way. No one really knows how it works, trying to figure it out, whatever. You can go to Blue Sky, you can go here, you can go there, you can go to TikTok, you can like try to do 25 platforms. You can go in as a Twitch DJ, go onto one stream live and then push 25 different, social media platforms that you want to be broadcast on. And maybe that brings you to a bigger audience, but maybe it doesn't. I think that like you have to make a connection with people somehow.
It's 100% the truth. That is the dead on truth. And you know what? That isn't any different. It was that way in the 90s too. Okay. It wasn't as though for the most part, some band was playing a bar in the 80s or 90s and they were just so freaking boss that everybody's ears perked up no, like the bands that were successful even back then were ones that had a mystique, had a look, could talk after a show, would connect with people. People looked on stage and said, what's happening up there? I want to be associated with that.
Right.
And it's still just as true today. And I think when, people talk about the algorithm, I mean, that's true. I mean, there is that working against you. And I mean, I don't know, man, that's just electronics and capitalism. That's just the sad truth. But sure. The other part of that is that you can't just think, if I just put this album out into the world and hide in my basement and never talk to anybody about it or know anybody, they'll just hear it. If I just post this link and I'm going to become a rich, famous rock star or something.
Right.
It's just not real. I mean, you have to like meet people part way. And especially these days, people expect a piece of you online like has never been true in the past.
Right.
They expect to own a piece of you in terms of a personal connection to feel connected to your music. I think that's more true than it's ever been.
Definitely. And I think it depends on what kind of music you're doing too. Like if you're a black metal artist and you are like a basement producer, then there's definitely those acts that like, and it was happening in the 90s too, the late 90s, early 2000s, where it was just like, this is, they have no contact information. It's like they're totally like, we're this dark entity and the darker the better, and we don't have any social media presence at all. There are a bunch of, I'm not going to name who, but there are a bunch of black metal artists that I follow that were totally against that are totally on Instagram now and like promoting themselves and doing what they can do to be able to get their music more out there, because like there is that voice, to be able to get it out there. But, it was maybe a little bit different back then, but I think it depends on what you want. If you just are a person that you're like, I just do this art and someone will find me, if that's what you think, it's like, that's not how it works. And it's not going to work.
But back then too, in the 90s, there was maybe like, I don't know, 800 black metal bands in all of the United States. You know what I mean? And like 100 big ones. You know what I mean? And that was it.
Right.
Now, like if you're not up there shooting off flares and like talking to people and stuff, 50,000 other people are. Right. Like there's no way you'll be seen.
No, totally. I mean, you have to get out there, and that's the thing. So any which way you can get out there is fine. I think that like a lot of people get frustrated, artists get frustrated because like they're knocking their head against the wall and they're not getting the results that they want. And and unfortunately, it's almost like the luck of the draw. Like
Yeah.
there is, there are like, okay, like I know musicians that like, I mean, I played drums forever, and like I was supposed to go to Berklee School of Music, which I did not go to. I should have, but I did not go. And I have friends that I went to Berklee, and they're amazing, great musicians. They never made it, and they're like, and it's like, yeah, it's hard. There's so much great talent that's out there.
Yeah.
And it's hard because like, how do you discover? How do you learn about somebody else? And it's like, you got to put it out there and you do the best that you can. But like that, if you're not getting, 100,000 hits or something, like you can't look at it like that. You have to just be like, I'm just putting my art out there. If you're looking, because you're thinking the wrong thing. Like if you're trying to get 100,000 people to hit you, then you have to do something else. If you're going to be an avant-garde, dark artist, like you're going to do some crazy,
right.
It's a niche more. It's niche. It's like there's only.
If you suddenly are that and have 200,000 people showing up, you should go re-listen to the last thing that you wrote, because somewhere along the way you sold out. Like you didn't mean to, but you compromised that somewhere along the way, because there's no way to appeal to that broad an audience doing something truly underground.
No, not at all. I mean, like, and you look,
which is cool. I mean, it's okay. But like you said, know what it is that you're looking for in your heart. Don't like decide that you want to be this edgy underground and then get mad when you get treated like somebody who is edgy and underground, like.
No, absolutely. Like, for instance, like say Hororhaus, right? I know that it's not like there's elements of pop and things in there, but it's not that. And I mean, like, look, I'm lucky. Like I complain too. Like a lot of people, I wish it was more, but look, I mean, like Dave Batts from Release the Bats plays my stuff. Scary Lady Sarah plays my stuff. Ms. Margot plays my stuff. Mortasha Kinski plays my stuff.
Yeah.
These would be DJs in the scene. I should be very, very happy that they are playing my stuff. So I am. So I just look at it from that perspective.
I think that's the right way to look at it. Like I was talking to Adra of Tears for the Dying the other day, who I know gets frustrated with the same a lot of times. And, I always say to her, people who know this music, DJs, writers, band, love Tears for the Dying. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like, that isn't going to be 20-year-old kids at Hot Topic. You know what I mean? Like they're not the same thing. But like you should take something away from the fact that people that truly know and love this music know and love you. Like that's really, I mean, if you're doing this type of music, the best cred you can count on, in my opinion.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. And I think though that you have to keep it in perspective of where it's hard to be like, like, oh, where do you fit? Like, people want to generalize,
sure,
and put you into a box, and that's just like the way it is. It's like, it's been like that since, popular music started. It's like, yeah. Where are you a jazz artist? Are you rockabilly? Like, are you rock and roll, or are you funk? Whatever genre it may be. It's like they try to put you in a certain box or whatever to be able to be like, oh, okay, it's this. And they, like anything, like you have a label, whatever, So, I mean, like hanging out in the New York City scene, I've been to Syntheside. It's a different crew than goes to Red Party.
Sure.
And it's like the Red Party bands are cool too. They're all cool. But the Syntheside scene is a younger scene. And if you look at the bands that play Syntheside, they probably have more of a following than the bands that play in some of the darker scene things.
Sure.
Because it's more pop or whatever. It's more accessible. So the darker stuff, things that are like, and it's no offense against those bands, because I kind of fit in there too. It's like the darker stuff is going to get And if it's more underground, it's going to be obviously a lesser pull. But, but people that are like really into it, that are into dark music are going to find you.
Right.
That's what I think. Like,
No, I agree with you on it 100%. And I think that's definitely true. And also, like I said, as somebody who does this myself, I'm not one who's really trying to, put my butt on a tour bus and,
right. I don't want to do
like
that
that.
either. Honestly.
I'm 47 years old. That day has passed for me. I don't want it. But at the same time, I get it. I understand the frustration of that when you put your heart and so, and especially something where it's good too, and other people know it's good, but you just wonder why not me? And like
Oh,
you can't think like that, but those are the intrusive thoughts, and like
totally.
it affects us all. So I just thought that'd be an interesting thing to kind of discuss with you. So I appreciate you kind of sharing on
Sure.
that, because I think it's something that so much of our scene feels, because it's so rare for somebody to kind of break on through at this point.
Totally, totally. Yeah, it's like anything though. It's a grassroots thing when it comes down to it. That's just my own feeling about it. And I think that the only way you're going to do that and be able to say get across a little bit more is you have to get out there and you have to play in front of people. You have to
That's the big thing. All the bands that have really done it, you talk about like the big ones now in this scene, Vision Video, Twin Tribes, Actors, but they tour all the time. They are always in front of people. And not just that, the show ends, they're coming out, they're shaking everybody's hand. There's a line around the block. I want no part of that.
Right.
But like that's what it really takes if you're really trying to do it, is you need to go through very lean times out on the road to get yourself there.
Totally. And I think that's like that in any scene though. Like there's stuff that's happening in the metal scene too. Like those metal bands tour all the time. It's like that's the only way you're going to be able to get out there. And it's like I realized that like I toured, I'm not interested in doing 50 dates, 100 dates a year either. Like that's not what I see in my future. Like, it's like, yeah, I'm doing H My Enemy, and hey, if it could get to the point where it's like certain places are like, yeah, we want you to do something, or they like it or whatever, if it was the right thing at the right time or whatever, would be cool. That would be great. But I'm not looking to do that either. So like, I know that, like, I'm not 20 years old either. And I'm not.
And that goes back to the algorithm thing too, that we kind of talked about is, look, that isn't real in terms of the reason why the algorithm works for like Twin Tribes is because they actually went and played a show, said hello to 100 people who followed them online, who now are paying attention to everything they did. It didn't go the other way around.
No.
Or at least not until they already had a pretty big following from that, and then it snowballed itself.
Yeah, you have to have the visual thing. It's like, going back to even like the MTV thing or whatever, like that's how bands became big, like they had it all makes sense. It's like you have the video, you have the audio, and you could do videos and you can be basement band or whatever, but if you really want to be out there and you really want to like get known, you have to do that. It doesn't matter what scene you're in, you have to be out there. You have to be playing. I mean, like for me, I'd rather DJ. Like I'll DJ and I'd rather do that. I'd rather like I have events that I'm doing up here or whatever, and I do them and they're fun, and they're great and all that other kind of stuff or whatever. Like, would I like to be able to, if someone wants to say, hey, you want to come down to the city to DJ? Yeah, I would do that, But like, again, I'm not getting on a tour bus to do that. So, but if you're complaining or feeling bad that like you're not getting enough from what you're trying to do, you have to exhaust all those things out. Like back in the day, you'd have to get signed. Like I was signed on a label. We toured, it went to where it went until labels like, no, we don't want to support you anymore or whatever it may be, and it's like sometimes certain, depends on where you are and who you get signed by. And, there's all those stories of people that have, I have a lot of friends that like, they were signed in the 90s, got dropped, because of Nirvana came in. were in rock bands and stuff in the city,
Yeah.
and they try to move on to doing other things. And I have friends that like have become successful playing with other bands or like playing with a famous act or whatever. There's those people that do that, and then there's people that are vocalists that were signed and can't get signed anymore because like the label already basically put all their money into it, and like once you're dropped, like
Right.
in the major label sense, that's it, you're done. It's like,
Right.
and it's been like that for a long time. But now it's different because you don't need the label. And it's like you just need to be able to have the right promotion behind you and if you have to network and get to be friends with people so you can open up for somebody. I mean, it's like for Ancient My Enemy, like we did this thing with Noir, and it's like that was a good first show for us because it was because of connections, and it was because I knew other people that we were able to get that show. I like they were asked Hororhaus to do it, and I was like, no, I will do Ancient My Enemy. Whatever. We did the show. It got us in front of people. Sure. So that's what you do. We get people like Freddie Hernandez, who does WFDU, like to play you, that kind of stuff. Get the name out there. Do what you can. Do whatever you can to be able to get your name out there, I think is what you have to do. But it is very important. Like you're saying, you have to do live stuff and you have to be in front of people.
Yeah. All right, Scott, I know you have a hard stop at 9 here. So the last thing that I'm going to ask you is, here at Sounds and Shadows, we always like to spin out to one of your tracks so people can get an idea of you. So for Ancient My Enemy, what is a track that you feel like really, if people are hearing this project for the first time, really encapsulates what it is that you do so that we can spin out to it?
Yeah, well, for Ancient My Enemy, if you're doing a video, I'm going to have to give you Hororhaus. But if we're talking about Ancient My Enemy, as far as a track is concerned,
whichever one you want to spin out to is fine with me. If you want to do the video, that's fine. But you could also we can spin out to an audio and just have the credits and whatnot.
Okay, cool. So with Ancient My Enemy, I would say Pinetar. That's the first track that's off the EP. After the instrumental, it seems like a lot of people really connect with that song. The other songs that we have on there, a lot of people are really connecting with as well, but it seems like something about that song is really connecting. It probably has everything that we do in there. That's kind of the best of what we do. So maybe that's why people are being responsive to it.
Nice.
So.
All right. So this has been the Sounds and Shadows interview with Scott Harris of Hororhaus and Ancient My Enemy. And we're going to be spinning out to the song Pinetar. Thanks for being with us, Scott, and all of you out there in internet land. Keep it dark, yo.
Thanks, guys.